Welcome back. You're watching Weekend Express. We apologize for that technical problem, but as earlier mentioned, that we're going to be discussing about the rains that have started very soon. Maybe we may have our farms being toiled, and of course we may have produce and products coming out of that. But of course, in studio to help me steer that conversation to my immediate left is Dr. James Kimondo, who is the Vice National Chairman at the Forest Society of Kenya. And next to him is Benson Ochieng, who is an environmental lawyer. Of course, Benson, we do apologize, but when we took the break, you were explaining on why you think enough hasn't been done. If you can just take it up from there.
Well, we can't say we have done enough.
Yes.
Because the story of hunger and lack of food and the drought ravaging whole communities is part and parcel of Kenya's story since independence. And one must ask the question, over 50 years ago at independence, we said fighting hunger and poverty and ignorance or illiteracy were our three key missions as a country. And if today, more than 50 years later, we still cry about drought every year, there is a lot of hunger around the country, and more than 50% of this country faces one form of hunger or another every year. And this vicious circle of suffering and hunger and poverty basically demonstrates that we haven't got it right. Definitely attempts are being made, but we are not there yet, and we need to do more.
All right, and Dr. James, of course, you also share the same sentiments, but I believe you have your different reasons. What are they?
When it comes to what we have done in the field, I see that we started off very well. I think at independence, this country had quite a bit of good in terms of plantation. In terms of forests that we had, they were quite heavy. And the population was also low. However, as time went on by, we increased our population, and maybe out of ignorance, we also cleared most of our forest. And that in itself has come to hit us back a bit. As a society, I think we have kind of started this sensitization of the people so that people themselves, as opposed to the public forest, I can see people have started taking up the issue of taking care of themselves, where they are looking at growing their own trees, as opposed to depending on the public forest, to a large extent. So I see us addressing the issues that are hitting us when we talk about the shortage of wood and all that. The people themselves are doing something currently in this country.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, of course, Kenya has been heating up over the years. But recently we've seen the rain that has come. But do you think the rain that has come, the little that it is, will do much to just save the damage that has been taking place? Benson?
Well, of course, it doesn't change things overnight.
Yeah.
The rain started just this week. Two, we are told that there are going to be torrential rainfalls. They are going to be heavy. And the story of rain in this country is as stressful or distressing as the story of drought. Every time there is a lot of rain, we have a lot of floods. And if you were in the city just last evening, you could see how motorists were struggling to get to their homes. And every time the rains are heavy, we hear of clogged sewers, and we hear of floods and people swept away, and farms actually destroyed. So it simply means that we are not getting it right. When there is no rain, there is drought and there is hunger. When the rains come, we are crying the same way. So you wonder what exactly we expect of God.
Yes.
But it simply means that our system is not working. Something is not right somewhere. Because where they are getting it right, they know how to balance it. When there is drought, they harness, when there is rain, they harness the waters and use it during dry seasons.
Yes.
And this is happening in some countries. Israel is basically a desert. But you can imagine that it is one of the biggest producers of horticultural goods in the world. And they time it so that that water is harnessed very well. We can do the same. We're just not getting it right. And we hope that this vicious circle of crying when there is drought and crying when there is rain is going to come to stop one of these days.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's quite sad, because then when are we happy? Even as Kenyans, as a country, if when there's sun, it's drought. If it rains, it's something else, it's floods. And then, of course, you know, with agriculture being one of the bigger portions of our GDP, up to 43%, then where do we get it right as Kenyans?
Actually, you have to realize that we have got what we are calling climate change currently. And with the climate change, one of the things that is coming in place is the lack of predictability. Where, for example, we are in Nairobi, or we are just out of February, Nairobi, and we are seeing quite heavy rains. This is not normal. When this is not normal, it means the farms are not prepared. So which means this rain is going to catch our farmers unaware, the farms are not prepared, and so most of that rain is going to go to waste. Unlike in the past years, when we had we would even say, when are we going to start, when is rain starting? And farmers would predict with almost to the day or even 2 days. Today that cannot happen. And that means this calls for farmers to become more innovative, whereby, for example, the farms have got to be kept ready all the times, which again is also impossible because sure enough, if you remember what we have had lately, is that these lanes are going to be over after this weekend. And then because I think the Met people said, this is not the beginning of the lanes. This is only a short brief lane.
Yes.
So and the question that is even coming to us is, should we plant now? And if these are not the beginnings of the lanes, then if we plant, what is going to happen is that the crops, the seed are going to germinate, and then from there, they'll disappear, they'll dry up, because if there's a prolonged period between now and the next lanes. So this calls for a very, a change of the way we do things.
Yes.
And it cannot be business as usual and expect that we are going to succeed. I would say scientists are working on this. One of them is trying to look at, do we have seed that can actually withstand this prolonged period after planting, that can withstand quite a bit of time of dry period, so that they can still catch up.
Yeah.
So we have to stop business as usual.
Okay. You've brought in the issue of climate change, and just allow me to refer to this. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change predicts that consequently that there will be a decline by nearly half of rice, soybean, wheat, and maize by 2020 in countries such as Ethiopia, South Sudan, Burundi, Bangladesh, and Nigeria due to the impacts of climate change. We can see some of our neighbors are affected with this. But then, as Kenyans, what can we borrow from all those nations that are finding ways of, ensuring that there is food security, Benson?
Well, climate change is here with us. Yeah. It didn't happen overnight. It has been happening over the years, really since the Industrial Revolution. And just to try to simplify the language, what happens is that when we emit greenhouse gases, yes, or let's simply call it smoke and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which happens in many ways. When we clear forests, the carbon that is stored in the trees, as we know, gets emitted into the atmosphere. When we burn sewage and when we burn fossil fuel, a lot of carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere. This acts as a cover, or let's just imagine a cloud cover. And in the science of climate, actually, the earth gets heated from below. So the rays from the sun hit the ground. As they escape into the atmosphere, they find the blanket of what is called greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, and all that. They act as a blanket. So it is as if you are covering yourself inside a hot pot. And that is what causes global warming. Now, the effect of global warming is that it causes a lot of changes in the weather patterns, yes, or the climate of any place. And just to try to simplify the language, this is what we call climate change. And it has been happening over the years. And for the world, it mainly started during the Industrial Revolution in Europe, sometime in the 1800s. But as you know, the problem of climate change is not confined to a place, yes, because there is air circulation the whole world. So it happens that we as a country, Kenya, are not really that responsible for it, yes, because we were not in the Industrial Revolution, yes, drive. Yeah. But we are suffering the impacts of it. What is happening in the world is that the developing countries like Kenya, where we fall, and the least developed countries, and small island developing states have a real problem One, because some of the effects of climate change is that we are going to have either too much rain or very little rain. And I think this is what you are raising.
Yes.
Because if there isn't enough rain, it means we cannot grow crops and harvest enough
Yes.
to feed the people.
Yes.
And that is just one area. In places where there is going to be too much rain, as sometimes we see, we are going to have a lot of suffering, floods, and of course a lot of destruction. And if you look at the world over, we are seeing more and more extreme weather events happening. And just what my colleague has just mentioned,
Yes.
the impacts are very much with us, because it means that farmers and small-scale farmers, we depend on this country, cannot predict when to plant. Even our meteorological department people cannot tell us with certainty that it is time to plant. And even the type of crops that we are supposed to plant. And all these are adding to the burden of the mwananchi, of the little farmer who has to find a way to live.
Yes.
So that is the impact that we have. But moving forward, as a country, it is good to know that just a year or so ago, we passed a law called the Climate Change Act 2016.
Yes.
So we have a law with us. And why did we pass the law? Because we realized that this is so important for our development as a country, because we only pass laws on things that really affect our lives. So as a country, the fact that Kenya is one of the few developing countries to have passed a climate change law, a law that is specific to deal with the issue, shows that we really feel the problem and we really appreciate the problem.
Okay.
It is also important to note that we are part of the global community that is really looking for solutions to this problem. And what we call the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change.
Yes.
And recently, of course, you've had a lot of talk about climate change negotiations.
Yes.
And even in global politics, you've heard a lot about Trump and taking America out of the Paris Accord.
Yeah.
These are things that as a country we need to be alive to. And we have to be part of that process. The important thing to note, at least for now, is that we are taking this seriously enough and as a country, and we appreciate how much of a problem it is, because the story of flooding, the story of drought, the story of death-related hunger, deaths related to drought are just too common. In our national parks, of course, sometimes you see horrendous pictures of whole sections of wildlife dying, the elephants and the lions and the rhinos. And it is such part and parcel of our story that we must ask, what more do we need to do? Because definitely that we are suffering this much because of these problems means we haven't got something right. And it is high time we sort a way out of this.
I would like to pick it up from where you've left it. What more can we do? What more can we do to promote environmental conservation? Because it starts with that. Dr.
There are quite a number of things that we can do that have been put in place. And one of them is to take care of our environment.
Okay.
There are two things that actually we can do. One of them is to reduce degradation of our environment. And specifically, when he has talked about the carbon dioxide, and one of the areas where carbon dioxide is stored, so that we don't have that blanket on top, is in our forests. So we need to stop, or we need to reduce as much as possible the extent of degradation of our forests. Here, we are talking, for example, encouraging our forests to regenerate. Because right now, you know, our natural forests, we don't do any planting, or we don't do any planting in those areas. However, there is a lot of activities, for example, grazing of animals, the increasing population of wildlife. We need to control those so that we can have a lot of regeneration taking place. That is number one. Number two, we need also to reforest the areas that we have cut, for example, our plantations, including the farms and even the areas where we have activities, even in our settled areas, so that we can have as much of that carbon dioxide that my colleague has talked about being removed by the trees from the atmosphere into the trees and stored properly. So that is one area that we can do in terms of reducing the impact of these climate change. The other one is also the way we utilize our energy. You know, in this country, we have we have to admit, most of our people are using charcoal, whether we like it or not, as the source of energy.
Yes.
And we are not going to stop it, whether we like it or not. We need to look at when this charcoal is being made, can it be produced in a more efficient manner? Right now, we talk about recovery from our biomass of about 15%. Can we increase it to about 30, 40%, so that the amount of trees that we are cutting, because Mwananchi must cook, must warm themselves. So for them, instead of cutting so many trees, can they cut maybe half or even less than that to make that charcoal?
Okay.
That can be done by the way we produce the charcoal, improve the efficiency of production of charcoal, and also the way we stop using the kuni, the three stone thing. Can we go into the improved jikos so that actually we can see a small amount of charcoal being able to spread to cook githeri, as opposed to having to put 2-3 times. You only put once and your githeri is ready. We need to look at those all these together, so that we reduce the amount of carbon dioxide we have in the air.
Okay.
Maybe just to add on what we can do.
Yes.
You know, sometimes it is so easy to point fingers. Actually, it's the easy thing to do. But responding to climate change starts with the individual, the very person in the house. And climate change and the issues, environmental concerns we face today are about individual responsibility, starting with the house. If we are talking of use of less energy, it means that you don't use what you don't need. Switching simple things like switching off lights, simple things like servicing cars. You move around the city and you see a lot of smoke emitted from the cars that we use. Things like using more efficient ways of getting the energy or cooking. For example, just as my colleague has indicated, because the conversion rate he's talking about is that if you cut a tree today to make charcoal, you only get 15% of charcoal from the whole tree, which means you have lost 85% of that source of energy. And that is happening around, yet there are new ways and technologies of making charcoal that are very efficient. In fact, the last time I had at places like Akuzi, they are able to recover up to 60 to 80% of the wood that is used for making charcoal. So if we help farmers to do that, then it means we will be using less and less of trees to produce the same amount of energy. But it starts with the individual. It means that we need serious campaign to get people to plant trees, so that you are not going into a community forest or government land or gazetted forest to cut the trees to make charcoal. Where they are getting it right, the farmers actually grow the trees, fast maturing trees, which within a period of 4, 5, 6 years, they can cut down and use as charcoal as they regenerate. There is a time in this country when the former president, when we had President Moi, used to say, cut one, plant two. Unfortunately, we have reached the age where a leader stands and faces a crowd and says, the rain does not come from the forest, it comes from the sky. And people clap. What happened to us? It means that we probably are not putting our money where our mouth is. Because on the one hand, the same leaders will go to the National Assembly and call a press conference the next day and look very sorrowful and start saying how we need to ban the issue of logging. But the truth of the matter is we are not going to fix these problems by ad hoc administrative decisions like just banning logging. We will need very good planning. We will need to find ways to harness the water, basically collect it during rainy season so that we can use it properly during dry seasons. And there are methods to do that. Rain harvesting is important.
Before we get to those methods, allow me to take this call. Samuel Kimeu is calling from Makueni. Samuel, good morning. What are your contributions to this discussion?
Good morning to you.
Yes.
Trying to put this across to you, we have received a lot of rain in many parts of the Makueni area. But we don't see people now, being encouraged to plant more trees. And we understand that if you want to have good rain, we must have we must have forest. Within our environment.
Yes.
And if I give an example, We are bordering the Kajiado section, the Masain area. And you are hearing me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
And we can see a lot of people wearing charcoals, which means that they are cutting trees without even a limitation. Would you expect us now to get in good rain if we have people harvesting more trees than what they are planting?
Okay. Thank you there, Samuel Kimeo from Makueni. I'll start with you, if you can answer him, and then I'll come to you, Benson.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Kimeo. I think his concern is very genuine.
It is.
That we have got the rains and there is nobody encouraging maybe the farmers to plant trees. But Kimeo, I think I would like to look at it from another angle. That tree seedlings, unlike maize, beans, green grams and all that, is not something that you allege that because the rains have come today, that tomorrow you plant. For example, I know a good nursery should have seedlings that should be ready when we expect the rains. So normally, these rains come around April. Okay. And when they come April, it means the seedlings should be ready for planting around April. So by this time, it means the grounds are not, the planting sites are not prepared. The holes have not been dug, and maybe the seedlings are not yet of good size, so to speak. However, I think we should seriously, this is the time we should be preparing for planting. And those people who are actually into those charcoal production, especially when you talk about Kajiado, I understand there is the Charcoal Producer Association, which should be encouraged, which brings all those people who are producing charcoal. And those people who are producing charcoal, if they're producing it in the right way, they should also have not only a place where they are producing charcoal, but they should also have a planting program.
Yes.
So the planting and the cutting should have, they should have those two programs. Thank you. If you can have that in place in Makueni, so that even if there are people who are producing charcoal in Makueni, they should also have their place where they are also planting.
Yes.
And they should be on the farms. Let's not talk about the government planting trees. Let's talk about ourselves, as my friend has said. It should start with us, as the members of these CPAs, that is the Charcoal Producers Association. We should also strive that on our own small farms, we have places where we're planting trees.
Yes.
Well, thanks a lot, Mr. Kimeu, for that question. It basically demonstrates that Kenyans really appreciate the problem that we are facing. And just as we indicated, this will require the effort of everyone. On the part of individuals, we need to be part and parcel of the effort to get this country to 10% forest cover, which we have committed to do in the Constitution, Article 69.
Yes.
It's an obligation of the state to drive this process. And that simply means putting in place measures to ensure that citizens are assisted, educated, and supported for us to get the 10% forest cover that we are talking about.
Yes.
And it means that we are simply calling on the authority responsible, Kenya Forest Service, to pull up its socks. What my colleague has said are very important. You need the science to accompany the growing of trees. Actually, in this country, part of the problem is that we have been planting trees. Where we say it is tree planting day, people go and dig some holes and put trees there and then they walk away. But remember, it takes effort, deliberate effort to grow a tree. Just as Professor Wangari Maathai used to say, if you haven't planted a tree and watered it, tended it and made it to grow, you haven't done anything yet. What we forget in this country is that it takes that whole process to ensure that the tree grows.
Yes.
But if we had good measures in place, which means first, we have the national institution responsible, Kenya Forest Service, provided with the right resources, the right technical expertise, which I hope is there, but with the right support, finances, so that they are able to facilitate the support that is required to ensure wananchi get the right knowledge, the right support, so that they plant in a timely way, they plant the right seedlings, and they take care of it until it grows. I don't think we are going to get it right. So it is both individual responsibility, but it must be facilitated by government. And we can do it. There is no reason we can't. If it starts with this person's farm, If you go in other countries, they just don't talk about 10%.
Yes.
They have ways of getting to 10%, so that if you have a piece of land and you are growing crops, the authorities insist, and wananchi accept,
yes,
that at least 10% of my farm will be dedicated to growing trees.
Okay.
And they are advised on the kind of trees to grow.
All right.
And they are supported to harness the water, harvest the rainfall and the water to ensure that it grows. That is what it will take for us to bring change on these issues.
Okay.
Right.
Before, you mentioned what you wanted to say. Amos Keter is calling from Nakuru. Amos, good morning. What is your contribution?
Okay, morning, Michelle.
Morning.
Okay, maybe I'm getting you. Okay, what I was to request is that I've just heard from Mr. Kimondo and Mr. Ochieng. And what I was trying to say is that I've just heard about the matter of food security. And I've seen degradation in Nakuru at high, and water harvesting being done poorly. I've seen, if you come to Lake Nakuru and see what is happening, you will wonder, because about 3/4 of the lake has been expanded by the water. And else, we are crying of food security when we are putting a lot of water into waste and consuming the land that could have been used for tourism and what have you. So you can see there is something that has not been done right. And our legislation is not right. They are doing things that are not matching what we are facing in terms of climate change. So I've just had the advices, and I was to request that the stakeholders, the county government, the forest, the people themselves, the farmers, must have the joint conversation so that they can see through the way we can raise the issue of moderating water that are going to waste versus contributing to the trees that have been wasted in terms of maybe you can use source of energy, maybe like solar energy. Like in Nakuru, we lose a lot of solar energy to waste. We lose a lot of water. We don't make our priorities right. Thank you.
Thank you very much there, Amos Keter from Nakuru. These are just some of the issues that we are seeing being faced in the country. But then how do we address them going forward? Because citizens are willing to help in the situation. But then is the government really giving a priority to the situation, to the issue? I'll start with you, Dr.
I think I would like to correct something here that my colleague mentioned here about the Kenya Forest Service going out of, doing everything out there in the field. Unfortunately, recently the forestry has become a devolved function. Sure. And one of the areas that has been involved is the extension services. Mm-hmm. That is working with the Mwananchi. That has been taken to the county government. And we are aware that in terms of personnel, in terms of technical staff, I think that most of the counties have not put in place those personnel to do the job. Yeah. Because we find that most people are still looking for that extension services. KFS is still on the ground, however, they do not have the resources to do the extension. Mm-hmm. They are still handling the conservation area, the plantation area, but when it comes to dealing with the community land, the community forest, the individual farmers' forest, is not part of their mandate today. Okay. What can we do? That's a big question, so to speak. But I see we need a concerted effort. I don't think it's a one-man show in all this. When you think about the amount of rainfall that is coming in, I think we need to bring so many people on board so that we can address the issues that we are seeing today. When we have got those floods that are coming in, we need to see a way, or the national government and maybe even with the county government, coming together so that we can have those other dams, for example. Mm-hmm. They may even be small sizes, mm-hmm. Including individual farmers. They can also have their small dams on their farms mm-hmm. that can take them for quite some 3-4 months after the rains, which they can use on their farms, maybe to grow their crops, and also even to water their trees after planting. So I see this as, I don't think there's a silver bullet that can solve all these problems, but I think we need all the people to come in so that they can address. For example, I think one of the main areas is the water that we are seeing that comes in at once and it all goes back into the lakes, or it goes into the rivers, goes to the ocean, and you lose it. Okay. We need to have systems in place so that this can be captured in small ways and in big ways.
Okay.
Right. Definitely, Amos raises some very important issue,
yes.
and one which we have mentioned in different ways. How do we ensure that during seasons of plenty, we collect what we need so that we can use it during lean times? And I think that is one conversation we have to get right. Rainwater harvesting technologies are very appreciated and very useful in this context. That collecting rainwater to use both domestically for small-scale farming by one's kitchen or house, and even to a bigger extent, some larger scale, is something that we haven't got right. So every season, when there is a lot of rain, we have a lot of floods. The waters flush into the rivers and into the oceans. And within a month, we can't even get vegetables in our markets. And I think this is where the system for harnessing or collecting water and the resources we have comes in. Of course, these functions have to be shared between national and county government.
Yes.
And balancing this whole issue of who is responsible is one that we will need to settle as a country. Because it is very common today for one to say, no, that is the function of county government because it is devolved. And yet we know for certain that these counties, a number of them don't even have an officer dedicated to forestry. Does it mean then that the national institution charged with responsibility for providing oversight and direction in that field doesn't take its role? And you will find that a lot of these functions, agriculture, forestry, land management generally, are all devolved functions. But we know for a fact that the counties don't have the capacity or the resources to do it. They can barely pay salaries for the core staff that they have. But it doesn't mean that they must escape the blame. What we are saying is that we have to strive within our means to get a balance between how to manage these resources, between the national government, county government, and the mwananchi. But let us appreciate that whatever we say, whatever the problems we see, there is a good portion of it that starts with individual responsibility. What is a person doing as an individual to help achieve the 10%? One American president used to say, ask ye what you can do for your country before you ask what your country can do for you. And I think that applies in no better place than in the environment sector, because there are things you can do with your hands. Unfortunately, we don't want to do certain things anymore, and our youth don't want to do certain things anymore, least of all things to do with the environment, which means that you have to roll up your sleeves, make your hands dirty in order to achieve something. That is what we have to do as a country. We have to try to encourage the youth and the people of Kenya to appreciate and to take part in.
All right. You've raised an important issue, but before we get to that, Alex Kahara is calling from Namanga. Alex, good morning. What is your contribution?
Yes, good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Yes, I'm doing well. Now, I am an agronomist. Hello?
Yes, please continue.
Yes, I am an agronomist. I work with farmers around the country. And one of the ways I feel we can best assist the farmers is basically conservation. And I feel from the Ministry of Agriculture, we should be able to at least have a target percentage of tree planting every year. So that every county at least is able to record a certain percentage of tree planting every year. Through this, with the time, we are going to get the forest cover that we are all looking forward to.
Yes.
And importantly, I also want probably to propose also one of the best ways to conserve water, maybe retain water from the soil, is basically through organic matter. If we are able to build organic matter in the soil, it is said that organic matter is able to store 20 times more water than its weight. So if you have like 10 kgs of organic matter in the soil, you basically be having about, is it 200 liters of water, or maybe kgs of water in the soil.
All right.
So let us have every county with a given percentage of, tree planting every year. And let us also encourage farmers to build organic matter in the soil. And importantly, before I go,
Yes.
In Kenya, I've seen this challenge, like, on social media, like Wanjige's challenge. Another day we had Museveni's challenge. We should have a challenge where every Kenya is, taken a picture of planting a tree, so that at the end of the day, the 40 million people we have in Kenya, trees, you can say we have 40 million trees.
All right. Thank you there, Alex Kahara from Namanga. Now, one, he mentioned the target, apart from the organic matter, which is another method that can be used, which you mentioned earlier about resources, counties not having resources, not having financing. Let's not forget that right now Kenya is doing more borrowing. So can we really sustain the financing to help conserve our environment? Benson?
Well, it is unfortunate that our debt burden keeps spiraling.
Yes.
But yet you find that the basics in managing our affairs is actually to get Kenyans' stomachs full. So it all starts with food security, in as much as it is important to have infrastructure and all that. And the truth is that if all of us took responsibility at individual level to do something about some of the issues we raise, it is very well that we could be dealing with a big part of that problem. So individual responsibility is something that has been stressed even by the callers. It is very important to also to appreciate that across the country, the farmers and the citizens know a lot about their own environments. And this is something that we have appreciated as a country.
Yes.
Whether we are doing it right or not is another matter. Public participation in the way we manage our affairs is a very important thing. In the Water Act, in the Wildlife Act, in the Forest Act, there are mechanisms to ensure that local communities are part and parcel of the policy making, of the planning, and of decision making in the fields in which we are working. So if we harness those well, then it is possible that we may start to address the problems.
Okay. Dr. he mentioned the issue of youths not being interested in agriculture nowadays because, well, it's known as something for the old, and it has to start from them. We are coming up, a new generation is coming up. As much as maybe we're not yet there, we have to build that foundation in the young ones. Apart from that, how can we go about it as parents, even as friends, as family members?
I think this is possible to some extent.
Why to some extent?
Because not especially when you look at the youth in the urban centers, I think there may be a challenge in terms of, we have got youth in this country who do not have any place where they can talk about areas to plant trees. They live in apartments and all that. However, I see a shift where different institutions today are working with the schools. Here, working with the schools, it means every child planting a tree. And I'd like to emphasize here that it's not just planting the tree, it's actually every child growing a tree, where the child is given a seedling. And every year, the child is supposed to say, this time you planted when it was 30 centimeters tall, and by the time you are instead at class 1, and now you're in class 5, how many meters is it? So the child should be able to see this tree growing as they grow. Okay. This creates some excitement. This is happening. Then we have got also quite a number of youth groups nowadays who are actually promoting and going out of their way. There is a team called Team Kenya, which are going in almost every county and involving the youth. The leaders are the youth, and they're actually promoting the tree planting. Okay. Let's emphasize here very seriously that please, and I think he mentioned about the nurturing of the tree, that we should not just talk about planting the tree. It's a question of planting that tree and making sure that tree grows into whatever you wanted it to be. If you wanted to produce, for example, timber out of the tree, you have to nurture it properly so that you get timber. Yes. If you wanted to get some fruits, then it means you plant a small seedling until you get the fruits, then you don't have your tree. Okay. So we should shift our mindset from just planting and leaving it there, and then assuming that you have got a tree, but planting, nurturing it until you have. And this gives an example. Let's take an example of a child.
Briefly,
you cannot just get a child and then assume the child will take care of itself.
Yes.
You must take him all the way until he's mature.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much there, Dr. James Kimondo, who is the Vice National Chairman of the Forest Society of Kenya. And of course, next to him, Benson Ocheng, who is an environmental lawyer. Thank you very much for making time. I hope we have educated our audience on something. As you said, it begins with us, for us to change the world, to make our world a better place for all of us, our kids and our grandchildren, perhaps one day. Thank you very much, our esteemed viewer, for staying with us for the past 2 hours. Weekend Express comes to a close. I'm Ashley Mazuri, but don't forget, we'll be meeting at 11 for News Center. Have a good day.